Shall we get started today? Spend some time in God's Word? We should do that. That'd be like a good idea and stuff. All right, so last week we talked Proverbs 31, verses 10 through 31, discussed about the virtuous woman. And I told you that I was going to spend 2 weeks talking about women. So since we already did 10 through 31, what is there left to talk about, right? 1 through 9. 1 through 9. So for our text today, it's going to be Proverbs 31, but we're going to talk, we're not going to be talking about the virtuous woman in verses 10 through 31. She gets all the press, right? Every time you hear a sermon on Proverbs 31, it's always 10 through 31. All these long attributes of what a woman should be. So instead of discussing that, we're going to talk about the other virtuous woman that's discussed in verses 1 through 9. These are basically admonitions from a mother to her son. This is something that we should all be paying attention to. It's something that's important. And as we get into the text, obviously it's geared towards a mother to a son, but remember, we've discovered over this past year that we're a couple of different things. Number one, we're all leaders, right? We're all kings. We should be basically strutting around like lions, not afraid, not affected by these distractions that are all around us. We can walk boldly through Black Friday sales and not worry about it. Because we are all kings, we're lions. This text is talking specifically to a king. We need to apply this all to ourselves. Also, it is a mother's advice to her son. Now, not all of us have kids. Some of us have kids. Some of us are actually mothers. I'm not one of them. I do have kids, but not a mother. However, these things that his mother shares with him also would be stuff that would apply to those that we are in the sphere of influence of, that are in our sphere of influence. So keep these things in mind as we discuss this. The first thing that we look at is the sayings of King Lemuel. Who is King Lemuel? Anybody ever heard of that other than in this verse? I'd be surprised if you had. There is absolutely nothing on King Lemuel other than what you see here. We do know this very important fact. Lemuel means belonging to God. So, Lemuel belonging to God, because he's identified as a king. People have put together a king belonging to God. So people have theorized, and cadets, I'm sure you're with me on this. Modern experts agree. Inside joke. Modern experts agree this is most likely Solomon himself. I don't know. There's no evidence to support that, but he is clearly a king that belongs to God. If it were to be Solomon, then that would mean that his mother, who is writing this, is Bathsheba. Bathsheba, of course, would be very intimate with some of the things that she advises her son against in this, because she, of course, was the other woman for King David, right? So, if that were to work, it would be Bathsheba. Regardless of who this mother is, we know a couple of facts about her. We know that she's very proud of her son. She takes ownership of her son, and that her son quite literally belongs to God. The sayings of King Lemuel contain this message which his mother taught him. O my son, O son of my womb, O son of my vows. Other translations say, wait, O son. Wait, O son of my womb. Wait, O son of my vows. It's really more like Navi to Link. Hey, listen. This is his mother saying, listen to what I have to say. We know that this mother has an idea, a concept of who God is, because this is her son who is belonging to God, who she has made a vow. So what she has to say is urgent and critical. Now, as you look through Proverbs, most of it has to do with a father addressing his son, right? Most of it is listen to your father, follow your father. There are a couple of verses. If you look at Proverbs 1, verse 8, at the beginning of Proverbs, my child, listen when your father corrects you, and don't neglect your mother's instruction. Also in Proverbs 6, verse 20, my son, obey your father's commands and don't neglect your mother's instruction. So at the very beginning, we're told in Proverbs not to neglect, not to forget, to keep dear the instructions from our mother. It's kind of interesting that we start out at the beginning of Proverbs with an admonition to listen, not neglect the instruction of your mother, and then at the very end of Proverbs, Proverbs 31, we start out with instruction from your mother. So it is really kind of framing all of Proverbs. Moms and women in general have much to teach all of us, and they're not merely doing that just by how they live, but also from their live. Now, not everybody has the ideal mother. No offense, I did not have the ideal mother. But that's not because she didn't try to be that. Even those of you that don't have a good mother, believe it or not, they were a positive influence on your life. Those of you that still struggle with your mother, they are still a positive influence on your life. Regardless of how you look upon your mother, the very fact that you were here today shows that there was a positive influence on their life. Even if they were a terrible mother and mistreated you, that taught you who to be who you are today. They were instrumental in bringing that about. So, if nothing else, you should give thanks for your mother for helping you to become who you are today, regardless of if you consider them good or not. King Lemuel's mom uses the phrase, "Oh my son," or "listen," because she desperately wants her son to heed her words. Each statement builds upon the previous, and the words are intimate and powerful. This mother's burden is based upon the fact that this king is her baby boy. It's based upon the fact that this is the son of her womb that she carried for 9 months, that she endured the challenges of pregnancy, and this verse concludes with the promise that the mother made before her son was born. This vow indicates that this mother understood that there was a spiritual and moral responsibility even before her son was born. O my son, son of my womb, O son of my vows. This verse gives us a glimpse into the heart of who his mom was. She begins her specific advice in verse 3 through 5. Do not waste your strength on women, on those who ruin kings. It is not for kings, O Lemuel, to guzzle wine. Rulers should not crave alcohol. For if they drink, they may forget the laws and not give justice to the oppressed. Alcohol is for the dying and wine for those in bitter distress. At first, this advice seems pretty predictable, right? Don't chase women. Don't drink beer. Don't drink wine. So don't be loose, don't get drunk. But if you think that's all that is contained in those verses, then you're missing stuff. The question that's being answered is, how will you use your power? When life presents you with great opportunities, what will you do with that? Are you going to waste your talents away? Are you going to waste yourself away? Following after women? Are you going to waste your life away following after alcohol? Utilize. King Lemuel's mom is no dummy, and she targets the area that most young men struggle with: sex. She also urges her son not to be intimate in relations with women, and notice it is the plural, women, not woman. So she's advising her son not to, for all intents and purposes, build himself a harem. You can think of King David. I alluded to Bathsheba at the beginning. You can think of King David, who, for the sake of his lust, had another man, for all intents and purposes, sentenced to death by having him lead the charge against the opposing forces. Who, for the sake of his lust, forced a woman to his bed. And for the sake of his lust, lost the son that came from that first union. But God was able to survive his plan in that, and we have King Solomon who came from that union. You can think of Solomon himself, continuing on in his father's footsteps. We've discussed before, how many wives and concubines? Anybody? 350, right around there. It led him away from his Lord. It brought things to his country that helped to disrupt, to help to destroy what was there. And though he was not a king, think of Samson. Samson was brought down because of his lust after women. He shared his most intimate secret, and he suffered because of it. Yet we see that God was able to use that even when he would gain his strength back after being held captive. Let's think of more modern stuff. I know, not really more modern. I'm thinking 1976. Who here saw Rocky? Who here saw Rocky that was put out in 1976? You have to specify with Rocky. There's like, what, 30 of them now? No, I'm just kidding. So, yes. I want you to picture this. Mickey, Rocky's trainer, is busy coaching him. He's working on the heavy bag. And these two young women approach Rocky. Want his autograph. What does Mickey do? Get out of here! Chases them out. And then he turns to Rocky and he says, "Women weaken legs." If that is true in the physical realm, how much more true is that in the spiritual realm? Nothing can get a young man or woman off track quicker than inappropriate relationship with the opposite sex. Moms, you should pray. Pray for the sexual purity of your children. You should be listening to what your children have to say to you. You should be listening to what they want to share to you. You should make conversation a priority. You should learn to communicate. You should learn to understand their struggles. And it's going to be tough to hear some of the things that they have to share with you. It's It's going to be tough to deal with it. But you are called to do that. You have a responsibility. We all have a responsibility to hear those types of things from the people that we hang out with. Those people that we see on a regular basis. We all have that responsibility to be open to vulnerable communication. Because if you fail to communicate with them, they won't seek you out to communicate with you. How can you give them the truth if they won't even come to you? Talk openly about issues. If your son or daughter discusses interest in the opposite sex, don't shut them down. Don't tell them to go talk to their dad. And dads, don't tell them to go talk to their mom. If your son or daughter confesses any type of sexual sin, don't alienate them. Don't do this through shame or rejection. This will cause them to go underground with their questions and their struggles. Whether they are fully conscious of it or not, children want boundaries. Children want instruction. They need these things in order to become productive members of society, in order to find what their role is in life and in their church. We have a calling to encourage them, to not only show them with our actions, but also with our ears, that we are here for them, to help them find out who they are supposed to be. We have the necessity to do that not just for our children, our grandchildren, but also our friends in this society that is so sexually obsessed. In Proverbs 31, verses 4 through 5, what is probably meant is excessive and unwarranted use of alcohol. In the Bible, wine can be a source of joy. Israel was called the vine. Jesus and his disciples drank alcohol. But alcohol, unfortunately, is frequently misused. Therefore, she warns her son not to abuse it. Verse 5 says that those who cope with the pressures of being a king by drinking forget what they have decreed. I'm sure you've heard against mothers against drunk driving. This is mothers against drunk ruling. She's madder. The king's mom gives two reasons for abstinence. Wine affects your memory, and it affects your judgment. His mother focuses on his responsibilities and not his privilege. His primarily duty to administer justice, wine and women get in the way of those responsibilities. Now, you and I have to decide what we want to do in exercises of our freedom. We have the freedom to drink alcoholic beverages. We have the freedom to partake of those, but not to the point of drunkenness. This not only goes to address alcohol, it also goes to address things like, I don't know, legal marijuana in Washington. Anything that would alter your conscious thought. Anything that would take you out of your normal way of thinking is not beneficial to you at all. God does not call us to be mindless. God calls us to be knowledgeable. Do you think you could really figure out Jesus' parables to the Pharisees if you were out of your mind on marijuana or drunk? Do you think you would be able to understand the subtleties of what he said in every situation? It's deep. God calls us to be thinking. God calls us to understand what his message is. And if you are out of your mind because you're high or you're drunk, you're not using your mind. This is why you won't see this church practicing prayer in tongues. Other churches practice prayer in tongues because they say it bypasses your conscious mind and allows you a direct connection to God. When people pray in tongues, you don't understand them. Nobody can understand them. They're bypassing their brain, and that's how we can tell it's not from God. Because God does not tell us to worship Him unconsciously. If He did that, He wouldn't have created us with the ability to have free will, with the ability to think, with the ability to reason. He didn't want mindless drones. It is important when we exercise our freedom to be sensitive to those around us. If you know your brother or sister has issues with alcohol, it is appropriate for you to abstain from doing that in their presence. It is appropriate for you to say, you know what? I can deny myself this because I know it causes you a problem. It is always appropriate when exercising your freedom to think of other people, to think of where they are. This, unfortunately, is a downfall of our society today. People are under the impression that freedom means I can do whatever I want to do regardless of how it affects anybody else. This is how you get Black Fridays where people get trampled. Because everybody thinks they're entitled to get that Xbox game that, oh, guess what? I didn't even want this one. The Queen Mother is not recommending in verses 6, alcohol is for the dying and wine for those of bitter distress. This is not a free beer for the poor program. That would be completely out of harmony with what the rest of the Bible teaches. She's using sarcasm to awaken Lemuel to the duties to go with his class and his status. She's saying, don't use your power to serve yourself. Chances are there are children, nephews, nieces, or students, probably not going to be royalty, most likely. But they will be doctors, teachers, senators, heads of corporations. They might receive college scholarships. They will make more money than you do. They might get elected to political office. The question is, how will they use their power? How will they use the privilege that comes with these opportunities? King Lemuel's mother says to him, don't use your power to serve yourself. We all have power. Don't use your power to serve yourself. Lemuel's mouth is to be closed to carousing. It is to be open to correcting. Verse 8, speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves. Ensure justice for those being crushed. Yes, speak up for the poor and helpless and see that they get justice. The king is to plead the case for those who can't defend their own cause. This is not true just for kings. It is true for all who believe in Christ. The moral of this text is, wise women teach children to serve people in need. And those in need don't only exist downtown. They don't exist just in this neighborhood. They are found in our church, in our community. How can you best learn how to serve others? By practicing it. You are given an opportunity to practice that in this very body. We are all given the opportunity to be able to share with one another, to help each other out, to come alongside, to make sure that justice is served, to make sure that each and every one of us is cared for. The natural progression of that is once we figure this out, once it becomes apparent, once we get in the habit of doing this, it spreads from this local body out into the area surrounding us. Everyone that we come in contact with. Every person that we have in our sphere of influence is helped by us, is spoken for. We minister to our brothers and sisters in need. We are more prone to serve those that are outside these church walls. We teach our children and grandchildren to look out for the welfare of the others. We teach them not to despise or ignore others. I want you to think about another king. It was all about meeting the needs of the destitute, the widows, the orphans, the poor, the marginalized. He had no problem talking to prostitutes, touching lepers, exorcising demons. King Christ. King Jesus. Jesus was the kind of king that King Lemuel's mother wanted Lemuel to be. In fact, Jesus calls all in his kingdom, those who call their king, to live as he lived. Once while at dinner, at a banquet, Jesus had some words to talk to. He had some good things to say to the host. If you turn to Luke chapter 14, Luke 14, verses 12 and 13. Then he turned to his host, and he said, "When you put on a luncheon or a banquet, don't invite your friends, your brothers, your relatives, and rich neighbors, for they will invite you back, and that will be your only reward. Instead, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind." We also see later in the New Testament, James, not me, James summarizes in chapter 1, verse 27. James 1:27. Pure and genuine religion in the sight of God the Father means caring for orphans and widows in their distress and refusing to let the world corrupt you. Once you've responded to the gospel, believed in Christ, then you live out the gospel by using your strength to serve people in need. Not out of guilt, not out of gratitude, but because you're called to. Moms, you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be super moms. Like we discussed last week, does anybody here meet all of the qualities of the virtuous woman? No. That's fine. The world would teach you that if you don't have your own job, if you don't shuttle your kids back and forth to all their extracurricular activities, and if you don't have dinner on the table at a decent time, then you're a failure as a mother. Wrong again. If you want to teach your kids what really matters, if you want to teach your friends what really matters, teach them who God is. Teach them the love that God has for them. Teach them the grace that has saved us. Teach them who Christ is. So here's some questions for you. Think about this over the next week. What type of values am I trying to impart to my children, to my friends? What are you trying to pass on? Have I made any vows or commitments to God in the raising of my children? If so, am I keeping my commitment to them and to the Lord? How many of you have stood up on this very stage dedicating your kids to Christ? How many of you have stood with those parents and made a commitment to be involved in those kids' lives and to come alongside them and help them? How are you doing with that commitment? How seriously did you take it? Do you understand the gravity of what you said you would do? What valuable lessons have you learned over the course of your life, the hard way, that you can share with young people that God has placed in your life? What pitfalls have you come across? What have you experienced? What can you pass on to the younger generation so that they may not have to experience it the same way? What healthy decisions and commitments have I made that have helped me in my spiritual maturity? Midlife crisis versus realizing purpose. Have you realized your purpose? Do you know why you're here? How am I presently impacting the children of my church through my example and my instruction? What am I passing on to them? What do my actions show them? What do my words tell them? Is there a child or a teenager that I've taken a special interest in? What am I hoping to instill in his or her life? How can I provide the necessary support and encouragement for the children and teenagers in my church or in my neighborhood? What will I do this week to transfer the truth to the next generation? Am I intentionally teaching my children, my grandchildren, my friends, my relatives, to have a heart of compassion? And how can I reach those that are in need in my very own church? How can I make sure that their needs are being met? When you keep these questions in mind, your actions, your words, what you say and what you do will exhibit what you truly believe, will exhibit the fact that you understand the love and the grace that was extended to you. This is the guidance. This is how we understand what our purpose is. You notice every single one of these things that his mother tells him, it's not geared towards him. It's geared towards how he affects others. Any one of you that has your mind on yourself, you are destined to experience that midlife crisis. If you only worry about your needs, your thoughts, what pleases you, your freedoms, you will be constantly in search for who you really are. You will never realize what your purpose is. You will be always searching. Why do you need to search any longer? All you need to do is turn the focus off of you and turn the focus to those around you. Our purpose has been given. Our purpose is clearly evident. As we've spent the year going through Ecclesiastes, as we spent the year going through Proverbs, all of it was geared towards turning your eyes from yourself, focusing on those that are around you, making sure their needs are met. Find your purpose. Realize what that is.